Good afternoon and welcome to our second LinkedIn Live coming to you from the Attensi offices here in London. If you didn't manage to catch our first live last week, the link is actually in the comments for the post for this session, so please give it a view. And as we said last week, please reach out. Any feedback, any comments, anything you'd like to see more of, or even pop into our offices and actually be part of the show. Massive thanks to Max Turner for being involved in our first session. Again, if you haven't had a chance to watch the record, do pop back and give it a view. The link for it is in the comments. So, invitation still remains, obviously, for this one. We'd love to hear from those of you watching live or that are watching this on record. We'd love to hear your feedback, your comments. Feel free to pop them in the comments live or send us a DM afterwards. We'd love to know what you'd love to see more of. And we definitely love anybody and welcome anybody that wants to be part of the show. So without any further ado, today's game changer and human of Attensi is Jamie. So Jamie, working in the retail and hospitality team, tell us a little bit about what you do here.
Great question, and thank you for inviting me on. Lovely to be
Very
here.
welcome, very welcome.
So I run our retail and hospitality divisions over here in Europe. And what that means is, for those who saw Max Turner last week, I work with Max and a number of other people that work end-to-end across retail and hospitality. A lot of what I do is behind the scenes, pulling strings. So this is a bit of a Wizard of Oz moment where I kind of step forward past the curtain and hopefully am slightly more interesting and more credible than the actual Wizard of Oz. But we'll find out in 15 minutes. You can all tell me whether this has been informative or not. But yeah, I touch quite a lot that goes on in the retail and hospitality space.
I think that was an invitation to hit the comment box right there,
Yeah.
Jamie. Let's see. So the subject of this session, Jamie, as we can see, is training for business growth, and obviously we'll talk about that a little bit more shortly. But I think what's really interesting and what I'm really interested to hear is, so training as a whole, so retail and hospitality, what differs about retail hospitality training to the rest of the working world, do you think?
Yeah, good question. And I think this is one of the biggest questions and focus points we talk about on a day-to-day basis. I think there are no other industries, specifically for hospitality, where the people are as much a part of the product. So for hospitality, if you go to a restaurant, the person serving you is as much as part of your experience as the product yourself. If you're in a retail store, more and more these days with online shopping being so prevalent, the people in that store are a part of that experience. So you can really get retail and hospitality work wrong if your people aren't up to scratch, whereas there's a lot of other industries where the product stands alone. If it's a subscription-based product, it's a service-based product, the product gets delivered and the people involvement is slightly less. Retail and hospitality, the people are as much of the product. So they're a representative of the value you're getting, which is why, for me, I'm super excited to be in this space, because having an impact in retail and hospitality training is having an impact on the product and the success of these businesses, which is where it gets super exciting for me.
It's a really interesting thought, actually. I mean, obviously, many years in retail, but I've never considered that. So what you're actually saying, Jamie, is that almost the employee or the team, they're an extension of the product. It's not a standalone buy off the shelf product. Is that kind of what you mean?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you look at hotels, for example, the person who greets you at the front desk, the shape that your room's in when you get there, you're going to remember that as much as the room itself and the amenities from the hotel. And again, similar with, I referenced retail, I think is coming more and more this way. Your in-store experience is going to be a lot of what you remember about that brand, or whether you buy a product rather than just scrolling online, making some comparisons and buying something online. So I think it's increasing as time goes on, especially in this economy where money's tight. The kind of the fight for wallet spend is people-led as much as product-led for me.
Definitely. Yeah, it's an interesting point. And as you've suggested, having competent people has a massive impact on the success of any business, really. But however, I know you talk a lot about businesses not wanting to get it wrong versus really trying to get it right. Can you kind of elaborate and talk that through a bit more?
Yeah, and I think it's a good slogan, isn't it? Don't get it wrong, try to get it right.
Nice.
But I think it's really important.
Nice.
And I think
we patent that now.
Yeah, trademark, Jamie Watson, Wizard of Oz. With the not trying to get it wrong, and I really think in retail and hospitality, the L&D training parts of those businesses have gone through a facelift, more aggressive in certain areas than others over the past 5 or 6 years. What I mean by not trying to get it wrong, when we think training, a lot of times we think getting up to a basic level of competency. We talk about compliance. We talk about let's make sure nothing goes wrong. Where I think some operators and businesses are starting to do really well is really trying to get it right. So sitting there and saying, what is our priorities within the business? What are our business challenges? What do we need to get right to take that next step? And actually starting to apply training there. Very simply put, if you've got a staff churn problem, your onboarding experience is a way you can optimize that. If you've got low revenue, sales expertise and getting in every retail and hospitality business, there's always the one flagship seller. There's always the one person that's like, imagine if we have 30 Sallys. That's what you can do with training. You can create 30 Sallys if done effectively. So again, the investment in your people through training in a tough economy where revenue's low, can we invest in sales training to plug that gap? So I think trying to get it right is using it as a business optimization tool rather than a can we avoid failure, which I think historically is where we were. We're starting to move along to how can we really get it right? How would you have a seat at the business strategy table rather than just the training table?
Makes sense. So what sort of top line what you're saying is rather than focusing on stopping things from breaking or going wrong, it's actually more about an enhancement. So how do we move to, I was talking about levels, how do we move level upon level and improve?
Yeah, exactly that.
Yeah. And I love the notion of, and it's again something I've used in the past and you've mentioned it a few times, is the closing the gap on performance. So the question I've always asked is, imagine a world where you close the gap on your performance, your top performer to everyone else in your team by just 10%. What would that mean for your business? It's a really
exactly. And I think even more than that, that's a commonly asked question historically, but how do you close that gap in the area that the business needs it today? That's the question that I think strategically training is going to have a much bigger seat at the table moving forward. And it's starting to, because it can be the answer to a business optimization challenge, not just how do we plug this gap and make sure everything's up to scratch.
And not to be too candid, but in your opinion, we talk.
Don't ask a scandalous question.
Because we talk, watch out. Because we do talk obviously a lot here when we talk about L&D as a function. So, and we've talked almost, training for business growth and L&D being considered a bit more strategic to business growth. Where do you think reality is right now on that?
Good question. And I think it's a really tricky one to answer because I think a lot of what we're seeing is extremely mature and sophisticated in that direction. So I think the mindset of a lot of L&D teams and a lot of businesses who invest in those L&D teams, I think people are really starting to understand the power of training, the power of learning and development, the power that we all believe in, the reason why we go to school for 18 years before we start working, because we need to get good before we can start. I think the mindset's there, and I think the talent that lives in this space, in retail and hospitality, is there. I think the next step, which is what we're starting to see as a developing area, but also something that's happening some places but not others, is what is the investment of that business monetarily in that training program.
Yeah.
So it's great to have a strategy, to have ideas, but to get behind this as a source of business impact, a source of business growth, how do these L&D teams, training teams make a business case that the output of training is tangible? The output is increased revenue. The output is reduced operating costs. The output is something that's going to drive at that big table that all the bosses sit at. How does it live as a priority there? And I think that's where we're seeing some really interesting developments in competency in this space, but also where we're spending a lot of time trying to help educate the businesses that we work with on how do we get, not for necessarily for us, but how do L&D, HR, training teams get more investment for themselves, whether it be Attensi or whether it should be something else that you need to start improving the competency in these business impact areas. So I think the mindset's there, the intention is there. I think how the money's achieved is something that I think the whole L&D, retail, hospitality community are starting to come together to share ideas about how they actually make that next big step.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. And I think also really good to hear. So, Jamie, if I was to not put you on the spot, but if I was to ask you to give me one big prediction for the future of training in retail and hospitality, what would you say? And do we need to take a pause and come back in?
Never. I think it's linked to the last question. I think in outside of retail and hospitality, the role of a CLO in a business has become more and more prominent. Again, it's an investment in a business to have someone who's a chief learning officer.
Yeah.
That person sits with the execs at the table and has an informed opinion and an influence for training in L&D. I think we're seeing that in pockets more and more in retail and hospitality. But I think in 5 to 10 years, that role, whether it be called that or called something else, will be present in most businesses. The acknowledgement that somebody who's got that informed opinion, who can directly affect business change through training, needs to sit at that top table. So in 10 years' time, I think that will be one of the leading voices when they sit there and set a strategy. How do we execute on this business strategy? Number one, the people need to be trained up on this. And this is waterfall down, how we're going to execute upon it. So again, whether it's a chief learning officer, whether it's another title, kind of top Wizard of Oz of learning, it's that for me is where we're going. And I love to see it more and more and more as you move forward, because every time you see more people at that table, it's just more opportunity to make a difference through training.
Amazing. Thank you. It makes a lot of sense. And I hope your prediction is right, because that's a world that I'd like to see as well. So as we do every week, Jamie, one last question. So something you're particularly proud of, or a memorable moment in your time here at Attensi?
I think my first appearance on a LinkedIn Live is my most proud moment. No, I'm joking. Great to be here. I wouldn't say the proudest moment, but I think something that continually makes me proud, and I think is, again, related to the last question, is anytime we see a job spec for an L&D manager go around within retail and hospitality, within the industry, and we see game design as a component of the requirements to get that job, I think that's a tangible point of change within the industry, that game-based learning, which we know is really effective. And again, whether it's us or whether it's through other kind of non-Attensi methodologies, I think that's a real agent of change that we're seeing. So it happens now and again when we see that pop up, and that's what makes me super happy and super proud, because I think that's where we are making a difference. And again, to invest in game-based training rather than kind of what was done historically is a showcase that if you're hiring somebody or training somebody to be a game designer or hiding those competencies, you're investing more and more in your people and the competency of people and helping those people reach their potential, which in retail and hospitality, it's how to have a career in those industries is a question that happens quite a lot.
Yeah.
The increased investment through that sort of competency that's been singled out, I love seeing that. So I'd say whenever that happens, I'd say that's a proud moment for me.
It's a really telling sign as well, right?
Yeah.
That people are looking for.
It's awesome.
For
it's real. It's what are the outcomes that are facts?
Yeah.
That means that a change is happening and investment is happening in the industry. That's really cool.
Amazing. Brilliant. Jamie, thank you so much.
No worries. Thanks for having me.
No, it's been an absolute pleasure. So as we say, and I've mentioned a few times, if you have any feedback, any comments, any questions, obviously, if you're watching this live or you're watching it on record, please feel free to drop us a direct message, get in touch. If there's more you'd like to see or hear about what we do here at Attensi, again, just drop us a message and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. If you'd really like to delve into the world, you can head over to our website or even my profile page and book a meeting with us so we can really get into the detail, understand a little bit about what you do as well, and see where game-based learning and simulations may be able to support you. That's it for now, but again, we look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks' time. Thanks very much.